What's up everyone, I'm Tim and this is my channel 40 Times Around, where we talk about everything related to motorcycles, camping, traveling, and adventure. Today we're going to talk about your motorcycle toolkit, all the tools you should be carrying on your next big motorcycle adventure, and how to figure out what you need specifically for your motorcycle. So stay tuned. Alright guys, let's jump right into this. So like I said, we're going to be talking about your motorcycle toolkit. Now this is a hugely important piece of equipment you need to be packing on a big motorcycle trip. Especially, if you're like me and you're always out in places like this where we're 30 miles from anywhere right now and kind of left to our own devices. If something breaks on the bike, I need to be able to fix it. Also, another advantage to having a well put together toolkit is doing your own maintenance on a long trip. Anytime I'm on an extended trip, I'm always doing my own oil changes, my brake pads, final drive, all that kind of regular routine maintenance. And it saves me a lot of money traveling and allows me to go further for less money. And I'm a big fan of that. So let's take a look at what's in my toolkit. All right, so this right here is my tool roll. This goes with me on any major trip. There's a couple of things that don't necessarily go in this toolkit, but I consider them part of my tools. One thing that isn't in there is this right here. This is actually a bicycle pump. Now, believe it or not, I've actually pumped a motorcycle tire up to 42 pounds using this bicycle pump. Now, the reason I prefer a bicycle pump over the electric one is that, number one, the electric ones are a lot heavier, a lot bulkier. Number two, they're not 100% reliable. Rattling around in your cases, they just break over time. So what I like about this is it's 100% reliable, it's super light, and it packs really small. And yeah, it takes a little bit longer to pump up your tire, but the truth is if you're stuck somewhere with a flat tire, you got nothing but time, and this will get you home, get you out of a pinch. So definitely something to consider is bringing a bicycle pump with you if you don't mind a little extra work when you get a flat. I also carry some rags with me. Just stuff these wherever I have a little bit of extra space on the bike. For obvious reasons. I also have a knife that I carry with me, but I don't have this in my toolkit because I like having access to it. So this is typically in my pocket or in my tank bag on the bike. And just a good idea to have. You'd be surprised how often you need to cut something or whatever the case may be. I don't use this for food. This is really just like a tool that I use, but I have a second knife that I use just for cutting food, and I actually have a third knife as just a backup. Now, this is probably one of the most important pieces of equipment that I carry with me, in my opinion, and this is a tire pressure gauge. Now, the reason this isn't in my toolkit is because typically this is in my pocket of my jacket or in my tank bag, somewhere very easily accessible. I like to keep a close watch on my tire pressure, one for safety and handling, but also longevity of tires. They last a lot longer when they're at proper pressure. And obviously the bike handles much better when they're at proper pressure. So definitely going to want to be carrying one of these. And I typically even have a backup with me. And that way, if this one, sometimes the slider in here, it gets a little sticky. You want to maybe double check that your tire pressure gauge is accurate. You can use a second one to check that. Now, sometimes I'll actually travel with the whole service manual, but not usually. Usually what I'll do is photocopy pages from it or, just print out pictures of different instructions for certain tasks that I'm likely to be doing. Brake pads, oil change, final drive, that kind of thing. Now, a lot of this stuff I've done so many times at this point on this bike, but what I like having the instructions for is, fluid levels. Those are numbers I'm not typically going to remember exactly how many quarts go in my bike. I'm not going to remember the torque spec on every single bolt on my bike. So that's pretty much everything that isn't in my tool roll. Now in here, don't laugh at me, but one thing I do carry with me on a lot of major long distance trips where I know I'm going to be doing a lot of routine maintenance is, believe it or not, I carry a full-size torque wrench. And the reason I carry one of these is because it takes the guesswork out of how tight to tighten things. I've been known to strip bolts, or just as bad as not tightening them enough. So any of the critical fasteners, anything having to do with your tires or your brakes, Just certain things you want to know that they're tightened correctly, that you're not stripping bolts out, and it's worth carrying with you. This thing weighs about 2.5 pounds. It's a heavy item for sure, and I don't always carry this with me, but if I know I'm doing, more than one oil change, if it's likely I might be doing my brake pads, I will carry this with me. Wouldn't blame you if you didn't take one with you though. Just something to consider. Okay, so let's open this up and see what we got in here. One obvious thing is you're going to want a socket wrench. I traded out a different one I had for this one, which is made with a little more plastic, and it saved me a couple of ounces. Typically, if you're looking to shed some weight on a motorcycle trip, first place you're going to look is your tools. They're the heaviest items, but they're also the most important. You want to make sure you have what you need to fix everything. So definitely worth carrying one of these. Now this is another item I like to carry with me. Now I like this because it's dual purpose. Obviously this is needle nose pliers, but it's also vice grips, which I like because they clamp in place. So it's kind of like two tools in one. I'm a big fan of anything that has two purposes. This is a special tool just for my bike. This is to take the oil filler cap off. Probably don't need one of these unless you're on the same bike as me or a BMW. Got a loose socket in here. Not sure what that's for. Now these are for plugging a tire. Definitely carry these. I'm going to get into how to actually plug a tire in another video, but you're going to want these. Adjustable wrench. Now there aren't a ton of bolts on my bike that I need this for, but I don't carry a lot of box wrenches. There's actually, these two are the most common on my bike, and I like these because they're also ratcheting. But there's not a ton on my bike, but this will cover anything that this doesn't. So I got some jumper cables here, and these plug right into the battery tender on my bike, so it's quick access. My battery is a pain to get to, and then all I do is just take this, strap this to someone else's battery. I can get myself going again if I do kill a battery. I've seen that happen where guys are setting up camp in the dark using their headlight to set up their tent, and then they wake up in the morning to a dead battery. So good idea to have these with you. There's some RTV silicone, which is good for fixing any kind of leaks. It's not super common that I run into that issue. Actually, what I have this for is because when I redid my clutch plates, this is what I used as a gasket. I got some Loctite. Definitely a good idea to carry that. I've had bolts come loose, particularly for some reason the shifter bolt on bikes seems to come loose for me. I've ran into that issue a few times. This is always good to have. I got a bunch of spare nuts, bolts, washers, things like that. These all came off of my bike, so I know they do actually fit. What happened is they have a bunch of new bolt-on parts, crash bars, whatever the case may be. They come with new bolts, so when I take something off that doesn't go back on the bike, it goes in this bag. That way I know it does actually fit my bike. Here's the second knife I was telling you about. Like I said, it's a good idea to have a couple of them. Now, here's one of my two extensions, and here's the other one. And what I really like is that this is actually like having three separate extensions, because you have this one and you have this one separately, but then for those really hard to reach spots, you have the two of them combined. So I like having the extra extensions. Also got some Allen keys. These are tire plugs for when I get a flat tire. I also carry around an extra set of brake pads. Now these just have a little bit of life left in them, so if I happen to be on the road and realize that, hey, I got absolutely no brakes left, I have something that can get me home safely at least. Just a nice backup. Zip ties are probably one of the most common items that I use on a motorcycle trip. I actually need to replenish these, but as you can see, I use quite a bit of them. This used to be a whole big pack, and now I'm down to 4 of them. So time to get some more of those. Another thing to keep in mind with these, replace them every once in a while. They get dried out, and there's a little tab inside here. They'll actually crack and break, and they won't lock into place as they get older and they dry out. So it's a good idea to put new ones in here every once in a while. I got some vice grips, channel locks. I like these ones because a lot of them will actually slip in. When you tighten them around something, they just slip. These ones lock into place really nice. so definitely carry those. I got some extra batteries in here. These work for my headlamp for when I'm camping, and a couple other things that take batteries. Obviously I got a screwdriver with changeable tips. Most of my bolts are all going to be Torx, so I got a couple of those with me. I also got a spare key in here. Now, this is a great place to keep a spare key, especially if it's locked inside your side case or your saddlebags, and that's a separate key to get into it, because otherwise, I mean, if it's the same key and you lose your key and it's locked in your case, you can't get to it anyway. But this is a good place to keep that. I have some baling wire, basically just if anything, you know, my cases, if I drop the bike and it's hanging on by nothing, I could use this to tie the case to the bike or strap anything down if it comes loose. Obviously got some wire strippers. I got a little mini screwdriver, but actually what I have this for is that it's a magnet on this side. You'd be surprised if you drop a bolt somewhere deep in the heart of that bike. It's nice to have a magnet. Just reach in there and pick up whatever you drop. I also have a mechanic's ruler. This is good for checking my brake pads, anything like that I don't want to be guessing if it's actually within its service limit or not. I also have some feeler gauges. Those are good to have depending on how in-depth you're getting with your motorcycle service. Now, the thing I like about this particular tool roll, and I'm going to link to this tool roll and a couple of these other tools in the description box below if you guys want to check any of this stuff out. But I like this one because it has a spot for all of my sockets. A couple of Allens, a couple of Torx bits, like I said. And then in here, I keep all of my screwdriver tips, just to kind of keep them together and in one place. Now, one other thing I have in here, this is for your tire valve stem. Every once in a while these will come loose, you'll end up with a slow leak, and all it takes is just this little tool to tighten it back up and you're good to go. So definitely a good idea to carry something like this with you. Alright, so that's it. That's my toolkit. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're building your own custom toolkit for your bike is you want to make sure, number one, that the tools fit your bike, and number two, that you actually know how or where on the bike you would use them. In other words, you don't need to be carrying that really bulky, really heavy, special tool specifically for pulling your clutch pressure plate out if you don't know how to do that task, or it's not something you're going to be doing on the side of the road anyway. So you can leave that one at home. Now, one trick I use is that whenever I do maintenance at home on my bike, I have two toolkits. I have the one that you just saw that we just went over. I also have a big bulky toolkit that has every tool in it that I could possibly need. And what I'll do is, as I'm doing a new task on my bike, I'll basically work out of my toolkit here that I just showed you, and if I find that I need something that isn't in there, and I'm taking it out of the bigger toolkit to use it, it's at least past the first test for me to end up in this toolkit. Now I can determine, is this a job I'm likely to be doing on the side of the road? Is it a job that I could even do on the side of the road? And then I'll decide, okay, maybe it should be in my toolkit. Now I know what that tool is actually used for, and I know that it fits somewhere on my bike. So just something to consider, so you're not just buying some generic toolkit for motorcycles and then carrying that around and never realizing that half the stuff in there doesn't fit your bike and the other half you'd never use anyway. Just something to consider. So that's it. That wraps it up. That's my toolkit, and hopefully you guys got something out of this video. If you did, make sure you hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe if you guys want to see more videos about motorcycles, camping, traveling, and adventure. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.